Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the high-level panel discussion of the Ocean Innovation Africa Digital Summit on the political agenda for development of the blue economy. I want to thank you for your participation. My name is Richard LaBelle, and I'm honored to be the moderator of the panel discussion today. I'm an independent development worker and analyst from Canada, where I'm speaking to you from, and I've been working on digital economy and science and tech for development and related issues since 1981. I've worked in 44 of the 54 countries in Africa, having most recently worked with the African Development Bank in Abidjan on youth innovation and entrepreneurship, with a focus on job creation for young people and young women. My academic background is in plant and environmental sciences, and if you're interested, you can find more information on my LinkedIn page and my Twitter feed. Thanks also to the sponsors of this event, and hats off to AFD and to Dassault Systèmes, as well as the City of Cape Town, the Western Cape Province, and the entrepreneurship support environment in Cape Town and South Africa in general. In particular, for the support of Ocean Hub Africa, which is a unique and much needed enterprise support organization serving all of Africa. The objective of this discussion is to understand what governments and some key development actors are doing to support the blue economy and Africa and beyond. I'll briefly explain the theme and introduce the 8 topics, and move on to the panelists as well. So you have in front of you a list of 8 topics that I'm not going to go over in any detail, which deal with issues related to the sustainable use of the oceans and related issues. The panel itself involves 5 speakers. The rough estimate, audience participants can ask questions at any time. There's a chat function. Those questions will be relayed to us, and we will select those questions for discussion later. I will moderate the discussion and inform the panelists when their time is up. Each panelist has roughly 6 minutes to present. And my understanding is that the session will be recorded. So I'm pleased to introduce our panelists, starting with Dr. Mohamed Cissé, the Senior Fisheries Officer at the African Union, Inter-African Bureau for Animal Resources, AU-IBAR, and his current functions at AU-IBAR involve supporting African Union members for improved governance on the fisheries and aquaculture sector, and he'll be speaking to that. Mr. Christian Teleki is the next speaker, the head of the Secretariat for the High-Level Panel for Sustainable Ocean Economy, Director of Friends of Ocean Action, and also a Director of the Sustainable Ocean Initiative at the World Resource Institute. Mr. Young Age Oislebo, the Minister Counselor and the Deputy Head of Mission of the Royal Norwegian Embassy in Pretoria, and soon to be the Ambassador for Norway to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Madame Veronica Weitz is the Director of Ocean Governance at the European Commission, DG Mare Directorate. And finally, Mr. Ruben Wambui is the Africa Regional Coordinator of UNEP Finance, the UNEP Finance Initiative. I will ask each panel member to introduce themselves and their organization to speak for about 5 or 6 minutes about what their organization does and what they consider are the priorities, challenges, and steps that need to be taken to address the issues raised. We have about 25, maybe 30 minutes for the panel presentation. Subsequent to the panel presentation, we'll have a question and answer, a discussion among panel members for about 10 minutes. The objective of which will be to distill priorities and agree on those, possible. And then we'll open up the discussion to questions and answers and close on that basis. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Mohamed Cissé from the AU office in Nairobi to start his presentation. Mohamed, the floor is yours. You have about 5 or 6 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Richard. I hope you are getting me clearly.
Absolutely.
And good afternoon to all panel members and distinguished delegates. My name is Mohamed Cissé. I work for the African Union Inter-African Bureau for animal resources. I'm the senior fisheries officer. I started off my career, I'm a Sierra Leonean first of all. I started off my career as a fisheries research officer and rose to the rank of acting director of fisheries in Sierra Leone. I work on so many projects during my sojourn in Sierra Leone. I worked for the EU-funded national project. I was the national coordinator, institutional support for fisheries management in Sierra Leone. I took leave. I worked for FAO in UNDP in Lake Malawi as a UNV fisheries biologist on the Chambo stocks, which are the tilapia stocks in the Lake Malawi, the southeast arm of Lake Malawi, Lake Malumbi, and Opashiri River. I also work for the Nigerian.
Looks like we have connectivity problems here. Mohammed, can you hear us? Okay. Okay, well, okay, there we go. Mohammed's back. At least I thought he was. We'll give him another few seconds here, and if that's not working, we'll ask Christian to get ready to speak. Oh, there we go. Mohammed, can you hear me? We can't hear you right now. Can you hear me?
You can't hear me?
Now we can. You're good to go.
Ah, okay. All right. So I came to AU in 2011 as senior fisheries officer. Then we secured an EU-funded project, which was enhancing governance of the fisheries sector in Africa, because that project initiated the implementation of the policy framework and reform strategy. It ran from 2014 to 2018. We addressed a lot of issues, even concerning high sea fisheries, concerning small scale fisheries development. Thereafter, in 2000, following the Nairobi Global Conference of Blue Economy, the African leaders requested African Union to develop an African-owned Africa Blue Economy strategy, which we actually developed. It was endorsed in 2020. Now we are presently busy engaged in the implementation of that project. I'm happy to know that there's a representative or the ambassador of Norway is here. The Norway embassy to the African Union is the one supporting to initiate the implementation of the African Blue Economy. So we are now actually embarked on that. That's what we are presently actively doing. We have created sensitization in the 5 regions of the African continent on the blue economic concept, blue governance. Now we are in the process of developing or almost develop the implementation framework to support the member state to be able to implement the blue economy strategy for Africa. Also to establish what we call the blue governance coordination mechanism at national, regional, and continental level. I think that's all I can say now. Thank you very much for this opportunity. On behalf of the director of AU-IBA and also the Honorable Commissioner for the Rural Economy and Agriculture, Honorable Josephat Sako, I thank you all for this opportunity for us to participate in this meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mohammed. I just have a quick comment, if I can make. In our discussion yesterday, we spoke about what Africa understands to be the definition of the blue economy. And you mentioned maritime and aquatic. Perhaps you could just give us a quick definition of what, from an AU perspective, is the blue economy.
I thought when I started my presentation, because now I'm just introducing myself, in my presentation, the African blue economy is centered around what we call 5 vectors, main vectors. One, from our own perspective, is fisheries, aquaculture, ecosystem conservation. 2, shipping, maritime security, maritime trade. 3, climate change, environmental sustainability, and coastal tourism. 4, renewable energy, extractive minerals, innovative industries. 5, enhancing governance, taking into consideration poverty alleviation, job creation, and also innovative financing. So those are the aspects in the African Blue Economy Strategy, which I will present when I'm ready. Are you able to present, or you want after the 5 minutes introduction?
That's it. You've done your presentation. Basically, we're running out of time, so we'll open up the discussion shortly after the presentations from our remaining panel members. And I will now ask Christian Teleki to speak. Thank you, Christian. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Richard, and thank you so much for having me. My name is Christian Teleki. I am in this incarnation, I'm the head of the Secretary for the Sustainable High-Level Panel for Sustainable Ocean Economy. Just want to say a little few words about the Sustainable Ocean Economy and what to expect next week when they launch their recommendations and report. Launched in 2018, the High-Level Panel for Sustainable Ocean Economy brings together 14 heads of state, being co-chaired by the Prime Minister of Norway and the President of Palau, to really look at the relationship between people and the ocean. And indeed, recognizing that our well-being is intertwined with the health of the ocean. And the question really is, how do we transition and make that transition to a sustainable ocean economy? The panel themselves recognize that the health and wealth and well-being of the world and its people depend on the ocean, and the potential is enormous. But indeed, the ocean, as we know, is in trouble. A new relationship, therefore, is required with the ocean, one that creates a healthy ocean and a sustainable ocean economy. But the challenges are great. And certainly the high-level panel over the last 2 years have put together a series of actions and transformations to how to get us to a sustainable ocean economy by 2030 and indeed beyond. I think the key message that is coming out of the panel is that the ocean is not too big to fail. It's not too big to fix. But indeed, it's too big and too central to the planet's future to ignore. And we look at the amazing opportunities in the context of this conversation of what the ocean has to offer, certainly in the African context, and indeed the panel where the presidents of Namibia, Ghana, and Kenya are part of the panel. We know that the ocean, a sustainable ocean, can produce 6 times more food than it does in the moment, can generate 40 times more renewable energy than it does at the moment, lift millions of people out of poverty, and indeed contribute to nearly 25% of the greenhouse gas emissions reduction needed to stay within the 1.5 degrees. When you think about that's equivalent to taking 2.5 billion cars off the road per year in terms of annual emissions, or the annual emissions of all coal-fired plants added up together on an annual basis. So these are ocean solutions that could help us get to a healthier planet by reducing carbon emissions. And finally, when you look at the opportunities in terms of the financial and economic opportunities, the high-level panel commissioned a study that found that for every US dollar that's invested in a sustainable ocean economy, on average, you can expect to have $5 in return on that single dollar investment, and in fact more in other cases. However, the vision of the high-level panel is really predicated on something that Richard mentioned in his opening remarks, where we need to, if we want to have a sustainable ocean economy, we need to effectively protect it in order to sustainably produce from it and prosper equitably. So the 3 Ps are really part of the vision that the high-level panel will launch next week on the 2nd of December. So protect, produce, and equitably prosper. The founding elements, certainly, of the 5 elements or systemic areas where the panel believes in order to address a sustainable ocean economy needs to be focused on are around ocean health, ocean wealth, ocean finance, ocean knowledge, and ocean equity. And the equity point here is extremely important when we think about this. This addresses the equitable distribution of wealth, dealing with human rights, child labor, gender issues in all the ocean activities that we do. So really making sure that we have that equitable distribution of wealth and rights to access to resources, and making sure that people are certainly part of that, and recognizing that important relationship between people and humanity, which in fact COVID has shown us in incredible stark circumstances around the world how tenuous that relationship is and how important it is going to be. And certainly the ocean has a central role to play with that. So I think this is an incredibly pivotal moment with this political ecosystem at the highest level, with heads of state taking a keen interest on ocean and transitioning to a healthy and wealthy ocean for people and planet. And I certainly encourage all of you watching to engage with your governments, particularly those governments in Ghana, Namibia, and Kenya, to really use this moment to spread this momentum on the importance of the ocean that plays both in our economy and our daily well-being. So with that, just a few words, but learn more about the Ocean Panel at oceanpanel.org and look for the launch of the recommendations and the work of the panel next week. Again, my thanks to you. Back to you, Richard.
There we go. Thank you so much, Christian. Thank you for that presentation. 5 minutes, good stuff. I will now move on to our next speaker, which is Jung Aga Oslebo. Jung, the floor is yours. You're muted.
I'm sorry for that. Thank you, Richard, and congratulations on the pronunciation, excellent pronunciation of my difficult name.
I apologize for getting it. It's okay. That's good to know.
I will cut my presentation of myself short, just to say that I'm standing in for my ambassador, Astrid Helle, and as such, the destiny of a deputy is often to be a walking disappointment. So I'll try to prove that I'm not. I will first say a few words about why the ocean is so important for Norway, and then I'll speak to the question about what to do to ensure sustainable and equitable access to marine resources. So first of all, I'm not an ocean expert. I love to eat fish and I love to sail. And preserving a clean ocean and managing the riches of the ocean is therefore something I care deeply about. And I believe most Norwegians feel the same. In fact, people in Norway's fishing community are so attached to the ocean that an old fisherman is supposed to once have said in all seriousness, "What would we have done without the sea? We would have had to carry the boats." So for centuries, the ocean has shaped Norway's identity. Even, the Vikings proved that when they crossed the Atlantic 500 years before Christopher Columbus and found an unknown continent on the other side. So ever since then, Norway has been an ocean nation. Our sea areas are 5 times larger than our land areas, and around 80% of our population live within 6 miles of the sea. So for Norway, and also Norway as a country with a smaller population than the South African province of Limpopo, has the world's 5th largest merchant fleet measured by value. Our ocean-related interests are linked to many sectors: fisheries and aquaculture, obviously, oil and gas produced from offshore installations, and as mentioned, shipping. Combined, these industries account for nearly 2/3 of Norway's export revenues. And then there is tourism, of course, with cruise ships and whale watching and all the rest of it. All this to say that for me and other Norwegians, the ocean is of fundamental importance. We want a healthy ocean because only then can there be a wealthy ocean. And this is, of course, important not only for Norway. Globally, 59 million people are directly engaged in fisheries, and between 660 and 820 million people are entirely or partly reliant on getting their food from the ocean. And that includes small-scale fisheries. Ocean-related activities are, of course, key to achieving the SDGs. The ocean provides people with food, energy, and means of transportation, and they produce oxygen that we breathe, and they absorb around 1/3 of our CO2 emissions. So then, obviously, overfishing, pollution, acidification, marine litter, microplastics all represent real challenges that we care about. It's against this background that Norway's Prime Minister Erna Solberg has convened and is co-chairing the high-level panel that Christian talked about. So what needs to be done to ensure sustainable and equitable access to marine resources in line with SDG 14? And what is Norway doing? I will just mention keywords because I realize the time is ticking. So beyond obviously the role of the high-level panel, and beyond what Dr. Cecilie talked about Norway's role working through the AU, we think it's fundamental that all nations respect the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. That's kind of a constitution that all the world should obey to, and it's the foundation for peaceful international cooperation on the protection and sustainable use of the world's oceans. We also believe there's a main challenge linked to preventing and mitigating climate change. Main challenge to reduce global CO2 emissions. Norway will continue our extensive global climate commitment, globally, of course, but also at home. That includes preserving the blue forests like mangroves, which are important to absorb CO2. We also work in many developing countries, for instance, with a program called Fish for Development in 13 countries, including countries in Africa like Mozambique, Madagascar, Uganda, and Zambia. The intention is to prevent illegal, unreported, and unregulated fisheries, and to strengthen the capacities of national governments to manage the country's own resources. Also, for more than 40 years, we've run a comprehensive marine research and fisheries management program in developing countries, also to strengthen the fight against IUU fishing and to combat fishing crime. And then we're pleased to see that marine litter and microplastic are topics that are climbing on the political agenda, and Norway has invested heavily in efforts to clean up and increase awareness and prevent further escalation of these problems. So basically, Michael, in conclusion,
you've reached your time.
In conclusion, then we realize that what happens in the ocean stays in the ocean, and we need to be very aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jon-Åge. And now I'd like to ask Ms. Veronica Weitz of the European Commission for her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and distinguished co-panelists, ladies and gentlemen. It's also a great pleasure on my side to be with you today and to have the honor to be the voice of the European in this distinguished international panel. I'm representing the European Commission here, and this is to explain, this is the institution of the European Union, which helps to shape the European Union's overall strategy. It proposes new laws and policies, it monitors the implementation, and it manages the European Union budget. And as Richard said, within this institution, I'm responsible for international ocean governance and sustainable fisheries at the international level. So I will not venture into announcing triple Ps or other things. I will concentrate in my intervention on the role of governments and authorities in the development of the blue economy, since this is also very much the role we have as European Commission. So in other words, how can public authorities ensure that the blue economy is competitive and creates jobs, while at the same time respecting the environment on which it depends? For us, the blue economy does not mean necessarily making a greater and bigger use of the sea and its resources, but it means making better and sustainable use of these resources. There has to be a balance between conservation and sustainable use, and I've heard similar statements by the previous speakers. So this line of balance between conservation and sustainable use is the line of thinking that guides our policy and actions at the European Union level. So what are we doing to develop a sustainable blue economy within the European Union? So let me outline here the main elements of our actions. First of all, it's important to raise the awareness of the potential of the blue economy. We too often take it for granted that everyone understands what the blue economy is and how important it is for jobs and growth and for the viability of coastal communities. But this awareness is unfortunately not there. We are therefore carrying out awareness-raising activities, whether for the general public or for more specific audiences, and very importantly, also for the world of finance. And as said before, as a public institution, our role is also to propose legislative and regulatory measures and to monitor their implementation. At the European Union level, we have a full package of hard law that, for example, regulates and controls fisheries, sets the standards for environmental protection, establishes ecosystem-based maritime spatial planning, or increases the certainty for investors and smoothes the path for sustainable finance. These are all areas of relevance for the development of the blue economy, but attention needs to be paid at the same time to avoid over-regulation and administrative burden. Setting a regulatory framework should, however, not stop at the national border. Oceans and their resources are largely shared and therefore need common rules, not least to ensure a level playing field. Jon Auge mentioned UNCLOS. This is a very important convention of the sea, and we fully concur that this is the framework that needs to be respected. But here also to flag that the conclusions of a new high seas treaty on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity would be a milestone, in particular for setting clear rules for emerging activities such as blue biotech. We are also advocating for a sustainable mining code by the International Seabed Authority here. So besides the legislation part of public authorities, we also encourage research and innovation. Research and innovation are essential for creating a competitive blue economy and for achieving Europe's ambition of becoming the first climate-neutral continent by 2050, as well as other ambitions under what we call the European Green Deal, such as the protection and restoration of the marine environment or resilient and sustainable food system, and this includes food from the ocean. Our current efforts in research, in maritime research, amounts to 260 million euros a year, and we hope to increase this amount in the future. Our future research program will also include a dedicated mission on healthy oceans, seas, and coastal and inland waters. So that's research, but we also promote investments in the blue economy. The needs are huge, and the blue economy is rapidly evolving with a number of emerging sectors that are rapidly growing in terms of employment and cross-value added. Christian mentioned offshore renewable energy. This is an important example. Last week, the European Commission published a strategy in which it estimated that the investment needs for the large-scale deployment of offshore renewable energy technologies by 2050 will be almost 800 billion euros. So besides traditional public investment support, it will need the blending of private and public finance to promote innovation in the blue economy and to facilitate also the commercialization of new technologies. We have developed a small funding scheme called Blue Invest that does exactly that. And it includes also a service package that helps innovative companies accessing private investment. Finally, nothing would be possible without qualified men and women and without qualified young people. Skills have to match the needs of the market. We need to anticipate today the jobs of tomorrow, help people to obtain new skills and update the skills of those already working in the maritime sector. This is why, for example, we have supported the establishment of platforms between business and education. You see, there's a wide range of roles public authorities have to support the development of the blue economy. But most importantly, the underlying principle is that we have to act. Years ago, the OECD calculated the blue economy could double in size by 2030. We cannot afford to sit idle. The answer is we need to act, in particular in a situation when the society is hit by the consequences of the COVID pandemic. So if public authorities do nothing and do not build back better, they will be held responsible. So we at the European Commission side, we are determined to act. We are at the moment preparing a new approach on sustainable blue economy, and this is one of our key actions for the future. So I have talked more about internal European Union work on the blue economy. there are certainly also opportunities for cooperation with the African continent, and I can elaborate on that further in our discussions. So thank you very much for your attention, and Richard, the floor is back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vates. Thank you so much. Ruben, the floor is yours. You have 5 to 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Richard. So my name is Ruben, and I work for UNEP Finance Initiative. Should be based in Nairobi, currently in Geneva, and I'll be back to Nairobi in 3 days actually. I think what I want to share within the 5 to 6 minutes, I think I'll introduce what we do at UNEP Finance Initiative. As I know many people are aware about the United Nations Environment Program, and so I will explain what the Finance Initiative does. Then secondly, I will explain what we see as the challenges and the opportunities, especially around the role of the private sector as far as the blue economy and ocean financing is concerned. And then lastly, I'll comment on the ongoing situation around COVID and stimulus and how that ties to the blue ocean economy agenda. So within UNEP Finance Initiative, we mostly working with the finance sector as far as achieving sustainable development goals are concerned. And we work with the finance sector around 3 areas. So one is the banks, and secondly is the insurance companies and the investors. So for the banks, we have the principles for responsible banking with more than 200 banks as signatories, representing around 40% of global banking assets. And then within insurance, we have the principle of sustainable insurance, and working with insurance towards the same. And we also have the principles for responsible investment, which many people in the finance world are more aware about. And the role of this is to mobilize private capital, or the role of private financiers towards, prosperity for the planet, but also from an insurance point of view to build resilience of communities. This is, understanding that there's quite a huge role for private financing as far as sustainable development goals go, because of two key things. One, there's been quite, the trend in official development assistance and within the donor community, and also governments are really much constrained as far as how much public finances can go into SDGs. And also now with COVID and in the context of developing countries, we also have the debt overhang. Within the context of the blue economy, so we have an initiative which is called the Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Initiative. And what this initiative does is to help the finance community, and this is mostly your lenders and to investors and insurance companies as well, how they can become more engaged within the blue economy. Because there is economic opportunity, and we ain't seeing a lot of private financing yet. Actually, given that SDG 14 is one of the least funded SDGs, we are talking about like 8% going to SDG 14 versus other SDGs. And in terms of the official development assistance going to the SDG 14 as well, it's mostly at 1%, which is very low. And recent estimates have shown that the financing gap, at least for the blue economy, is around 150 billion per year if we're going to achieve this by 2030. So in this regard, what do we see as the role of UNEP Finance Initiative principles? One is mobilizing a community of finance players and giving them access to industry-wide guidance and tools, and how to align their investments towards maritime conservation and what's happening within the ocean economy space. And then secondly, we see the opportunity of co-creation between the industry players as far as access to science science-led methodologies of how to assess ESG factors within the blue economy. And thirdly, through this global network, then it means there is convening power, because we're looking at some of the biggest finance players within this space. Because our focus is mostly about the financing, what do we see as the challenge? I think that has been mentioned. So there are issues to do with there's overexploitation of the ocean. There's not only overexploitation, but we're also seeing a lot of pollution happening. Just for context, within Africa, we have 6 island nations and all these 38 or so coastal countries. And within that, we feel the most vulnerable, except the players, and by the players I mean the fisheries and the shipping industry, is mostly the communities. So the communities are living around coastal areas, we see them as most affected. And where we see as the role of government is threefold. One is creating an enabling environment in terms of capital markets development, because most investors in the blue economy are looking for predictability and stability. And so you need a policy framework that gives them predictability and stability for them to invest. Then we see the role of government as supporting strategic investments, and this could be around preserving marine ecosystems, around energy. So we are looking at say wind energy offshore. And thirdly is government investing around resilience of communities. And the third intervention, which we think is key, is also through actual investment. And we've seen public-private partnerships have huge potential. And just to mention, what like mentioned is that there's a very big, huge case or use case for public-private partnership, given the return of investments in the blue economy is high. The last point I want to make is COVID has really disrupted economies dependent on the ocean. It is estimated that small island developing states have lost 7.4 billion in GDP due to COVID. And also it means they are also constrained in terms of servicing their debt. And so with this in mind, then we also require initiatives around finance in as far as stimulus packages go for developing countries. There will be there's a case for interventions towards COVID, which is ring-fenced around maritime economies. So I'm gonna stop at that, and back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Ruben, for your comments. Most interesting. We're running out of time. We have about 23 more minutes. I'd like to open up the discussion very quickly on the topics that have been suggested, and also based on your views of what are the key issues here. Perhaps I can ask Christian to just start off the conversation. What do you feel we should be focused on here among all of the issues that have been discussed? What are the priorities, in your opinion? We have, let's say, 7 minutes to discuss this before we move to question and answer.
Well, thanks very much, Richard, and thanks to my fellow panelists. Some really fascinating insights. I think realistically, what's really going to be important for a sustainable ocean economy is twofold. One is political will, and ensuring you have the policy frameworks in place that are going to create those enabling conditions for action to be taken. There is enforcement, and the regulations that are going to be put in place, and that there is a recognition that the ocean is very much a fluid environment, and as such, you need to be working with adjacent countries and working together in order to sustainably manage the ocean and the coastal resources, etc. I think the second component to that really is the investment, and really recognizing that in order to manage and think about some of those resources in the ocean as assets, you need to manage, you need to invest in those assets in order to keep drawing down the capital that's being derived from those. And of course, that then relies on working with government to make sure that those policy and regulations are placed for that investment, to incur. So I think that two very important dimensions that are there that I think, in the African content certainly is this, political will. And we're certainly seeing this around a range of different countries within the African Union, as our colleague Mohammed has clearly mentioned, a priority within the African Union. But also this, investment and looking at the lens of investment through the Sustainable Blue Economy financing principles that Ruben mentioned, that are coming out of UNEP-FI and other institutions that are being supported. So you start to see a very clear ecosystem that I think is being created around the sustainable ocean economy that involves nation states, finance, other nations working together to achieve the outcomes that I think everyone seeks. That's good for people, economies, and planet. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Christian. So political will, investment, according to the principles outlined by Ruben. Mohammed, what would you add as your perspective? What do you think is most important from an African perspective in matters related to the blue economy?
Thank you very much, Richard, for that question. In terms of our perspective, because what we agree on with we have done a lot of consultation. And the strategy we developed came out of stakeholder consultation when they identify those assorted areas for blue growth development on the continent. Now we have developed the blue economy strategy. I think, first of all, we should try to support the African member states, the 55 countries, some of them who have not been able or who are not yet embarked on the process of developing a framework for blue economic development. I think there's a need to support them. Some African countries like Seychelles, Mauritius have gone ahead and they have their own blue economy strategy. But also we have the regional institutions, the regional economic community. We have 8 of them, which we work with them directly to be able to support the members. So they also need regional strategy. The Intergovernmental Authority for Development, IGAD, in this region, in the East African region, they have developed a very sound one. The Indian Ocean Commission have developed a very sound one. So we need that, first of all. Secondly, when supporting AU member states, what has been the challenge is to establish what we call blue governance. We should develop a mechanism for blue governance which integrate all at the national level, which integrate all interagency cooperation. Because you have at the national level, you have the fisheries department, you have the maritime department, you have the trade department. You have so many departments that have a stake in the ocean. So we need to bring them together so that we establish what we call a functional blue governance. And we, African Union, we have gone ahead and formulated a framework to support national level, regional level, and even continental level. There's also a need for capacity building in concept like marine spatial planning. One of the panelists, distinguished panelists, also mentioned that one. Seychelles has also gone ahead to do that one because we should create a space for the different entities to operate. And that one will bring inclusiveness, a space, and also to be able to align the global instrument with the national instrument. And one of the questions I saw here, how is your ocean economy related to international perspective? And someone talked about the SDG, somebody talked about the UNFCCC, the United Framework Convention, and also UNCLOS. So these are all necessary. So we need, first of all, not to restrict in the African Union perspective, not to restrict ourselves to ocean. Also, we have a lot of inland water bodies apart from the oceans. We have the Lake Tanganyika, we have Lake Victoria and the like. And also we do need to bring them on board so that we cannot restrict ourselves to ocean alone, because there you have the real need to strengthen community participation, which is very, very necessary. So the regulatory framework should take into that, the community participation, inclusive blue governance. Otherwise, and that is the essence of blue governance. Otherwise, we are not able to do anything. As we go on, we bring a little more perspective on this because there was a mention of COVID-19, because we know it has disrupted activities along the value chain. It has affected market. I mean, women who are involved more in the post-catch sector, in the fishery sector, the post-harvest sector, the activities have been affected, and this has impacted on food security, on the availability of fish supplies in the market because of COVID-19 restriction in some of the members. So the cross-border activity, which is very instrumental in moving fish across borders, have also been affected. And also income for small SMEs, for those who are involved along the beaches are also affected. So it has a whole lot of, even in the aquaculture, the fish farmers, the fish farming sector, the input suppliers are affected. I mean, when you talk about fingerlings, some of them are not being able to move to one farm to another. So there has been a whole lot of destruction along the value chain. You have to take into consideration, even at international market. So, the African countries play significant role in international fish trade. 10 billion annually we contribute, either by export or import. So that all is affected, the international perspective, in terms of fish export or even fish import because of restriction. So those are some of the things I think I'll be able to. So in terms of priority, I think we should build capacity on the continent. We should enhance awareness on blue economy and blue governance concept. Those concepts need to be ingrained. And FAO has done a lot. EU also is supporting a lot. Even the formulation of a blue economy strategy was EU was one of the donors that supported that. Yeah.
Mohammed, thank you so much. Very comprehensive overview. Young Aga, would you have anything you can to comment on in this matter? What do you feel are, from a Norwegian perspective, the priorities?
Thank you for the opportunity. I'll be very brief. I want to say a couple of words about the last question on your list, Richard, the need for women and youth empowerment in the blue economy. So we know that in small-scale fisheries, women and young people have a role in the value chain. They are the ones who bring the products to the markets. They are the ones who are selling them to the consumers. I think we have some feedback.
Perhaps you could mute your microphone, Mohammed. Mohammed, could you just mute your microphone? Just mute it so we don't hear your. That's it. Okay, please carry on, Young-Aga.
Okay, thank you. So the empowerment of women and youth, in particular regarding small-scale fisheries, in order to enhance their role in the value chain, and perhaps also to facilitate entrepreneurship and develop market opportunities, look for ways to increase the value of the product, not only deliver the raw material and then be left with pennies compared to those higher up in the chain. The small-scale fisheries is so important that you cannot not use the potential that lies in empowering women and youth. And in order to do that, there are two fundamentally important issues to deal with. One is education, and the other is health, including sexual and reproductive health. Because the objective would be to strengthen the value chain of small-scale fisheries and make sure that the benefits from the fisheries come to the people who actually create the values, not only those higher ups in the chain. And so women and young people have an important role. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Young-Aga, for those really quite important comments. The gender equality issue is extremely important in matters related to all matters related to development in Africa and beyond. So I'm glad that you raised those very important points. We're running out of time for this discussion within panel. What I'd like to do is address some of the questions, a Q&A, and then if we have time, we'll come back to a further discussion among ourselves. We already have some very useful inputs that can help us to come to some sort of agreement on priorities. But before I do that, let me just now go to the Q&A. And here I have one question that we have received from participants. And let me just quote it right now. And I'll ask Madame Vates, who's already answered in part, to do so de vive voix so that we can all hear. So the question is, what has been the progress made by the World Trade Organization on saving our oceans? And are governments reinvesting the fisheries subsidies? Well, that's another question, I think. So let's look at the WTO question. And Madame Vates, perhaps you could add to what you've already shared with the panel members. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And I'm happy to respond to the question of Alexa. The WTO has got a concrete mandate under SDG 14, on this SDG 14.6, to find an agreement by the end of 2020 that allows to eliminate subsidies that contribute to overcapacity and overfishing and that contribute to illegal fishing. So we have the deadline by the end of the year. There have been lots of discussions over the last year and over the last years, and in principle, the WTO should already have reached an agreement by the ministerial conference in June this year, but unfortunately, due to COVID, that meeting had been postponed, and the discussions have been slowed down slightly to the fact that meetings can only take place at the virtual level. So what I know is going on is that all members at WTO are fully committed to work at full throttle towards achieving an agreement still by the end of the year. There is a compromise text by the chair of those negotiations on the table, which includes a couple of disciplines. I don't want to go into the WTO jargon, but it's a good basis of discussion. And to my knowledge, all the members of WTO are ready to discuss on the basis of this compromise paper. So we are hoping very much, and we are working as European very much towards achieving an agreement at WTO by the end of the year. Should this not happen, which we hope is not the case, then we will have to make sure that an agreement is found at the earliest convenience of this matter.
Thank you, Ms. Vates. Thank you so much for that comment. Let me go to the next question here. This is a question regarding let me just get it straight here. It's sort of moved around. Fishery subsidies. So the question is, are governments reinvesting the fisheries subsidies on other needs and away from fisheries, for example? It seems a fairly specialized question. Mohammed, do you have any sense of that, or perhaps other panel members? Let me start with you, Mohammed. You might be more aware of this issue. Are governments reinvesting fisheries subsidies on other needs and away from fisheries, for example, in Africa? You're muted. You need to unmute. Mohammed.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
Richard, for that question. One of the areas we try to encourage African governments to do is for example, the money they receive from activities like infractions, that is, vessels caught doing illegal fishing, to reinvest it in economic growth. But what we see, they have been investing in other sectors of the economy, infrastructure, education, health. But the fisheries department itself is lacking certain facilities. For example, a very strong MCS. So we have been putting pressure on governments that the money they get from fining or from punishing for vessels that have been caught doing illegal fishing in their water, they should invest in strengthening their MCS capability, monetary control and surveillance, in order to effectively combat illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. This money, indeed, like the subsidies they are getting, but they reinvest it in other sectors, which I believe is true, like in education, in health. So the fisheries sector in Africa, fish agriculture in Africa, is financing other sectorial department or other segment of the population, but at the detriment of the fishery itself. Because in most African countries, they don't have a very strong capability to be able to deter illegal fishing, which is very crucial in fisheries management. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. We have about 6 more minutes here, so let's go through the next question. How much are the hindrances? How much? To what extent can hindrances be tracked back to institutional funding models, which are based on non-sustainable forms of mining in particular? So what is the concern related to, I mean, the concern here is non-sustainable mining, and what can we do to address the institutional funding mechanisms that support unsustainable extractive resources in the blue economy sphere? Ruben, would you have a comment to add on that? It's a fairly specialized question.
So not specific to mining, but I think I will want to address it as a hindrance towards traditional funding.
Sure.
I think the need, I would say, one that we identify is that a lot of funding and investment within the Africa blue economy space is very traditional, and one need we identify is many participants within the blue economy, they need access to how to come up with structured and blended finance models of funding. In terms of the return on investment, it's clear the report from Ocean Panel on financing of this by 2050 is very clear, 5x return. But it's something many developing countries do not have the capacity, especially when even financial institutions or even banks are working within Africa. That is not like their forte. And we see this happening in other places like Europe, with banks like BNP Paribas being at the forefront of structuring blue economy finance instruments. So I think the need is, I see the potential for those who want to invest in this sector and maybe support the sector, maybe even from the donor or community, to be able to help players, be it shipping industry and fisheries, to be able to come up with non-traditional finance mechanisms. This could be bonds, or even like reefs, and like even if it's governments, to even have swaps for their debts, which go directly in conserving nature conservation and maritime preservation. So I think the need is traditional financing instruments are not sufficient, and they are not attractive to sophisticated investors.
Thank you, Ruben. Thank you so much. Now we have 3 minutes.
I can try the question on eco-labeling.
Let me just, before we get to that, I just want to do a quick wrap up of priorities, and then we can address that, because we're likely to be cut off in mid-sentence here. So let me just sort of quickly wrap up what the priorities are, because I wanted to make the point about coming to terms with some priorities and actionable items. So let me go over what we've just said, and I'll quote Christian here to some extent. Political will, investment according to the principles outlined by Ruben, sustainable blue economy investment principles, and those investment principles apply, of course, beyond the blue economy, and they're investment principles that we need to encourage and support on a much greater basis. Mohammed's excellent points about the comprehensive priorities that we need to address in the African context. And I think it's important that we remain quite aware of that. Thank you, Mohammed, for making a point there. The importance of women and of communities, and of supporting fisher communities in particular. My particular interest is seeing support for youth entrepreneurship, and especially young women entrepreneurs in those communities, both in a marine and freshwater environment. And then, of course, principles of investment, again, comes back to what Ruben just said. So that summarizes basically the main principles that we've come to agree on or discussed. I want to thank all panel members for their participation. Again, I want to thank our friends from l'Ambassade de France, the City of Cape Town, WESCRO, Western Cape Development Authority, and the Government of South Africa in general, the V&A Waterfront, and Dassault Systems for supporting the Ocean Hub Africa, which is, in my opinion, an extremely important initiative to support entrepreneurship and innovation in the blue economy in Africa, and not just in South Africa, of course, but in Africa in general. Having said that, I will now go on to, we have 30 seconds to talk about labeling. Mohammed, did you have something to say? Bearing in mind, you're probably going to be cut off in mid-sentence.
Yes, thank you very much. It's something which we have been trying to eco-labeling to promote on the African continent, but we have foreseen challenges because the Marine Stewardship Council, they have processes, fisheries improvement program, which African countries, which is a procedure to go through
10
before
seconds.
your fish product can be eco-labeled. So indeed, it has been a challenge. And what we have done, we have created awareness among the African country, and they take the decision.